And now, to offer opening remarks, I'd like to invite our fearless leader, Andrew Wilson. Let me read his bio first. Andrew Wilson is the Executive Director of the Center for International Private Enterprise, where he has worked since 1996 in leadership roles, including Deputy Director for Strategic Planning and Regional Director for Europe, Eurasia, and South Asia. He has extensive experience in private sector development in conflict and post-conflict settings with a focus on reducing corruption, strengthening business advocacy, and advancing economic reform. Andrew holds a master's in Eastern European Area Studies from the University of London and a bachelor's in history from Lewis and Clark College. He also serves on several nonprofit boards in the US and abroad. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Andrew Wilson.
Well, good morning, and welcome to our conference today that is exploring the themes around building resilient economies. In his remarks to you, our chairman laid out some broad themes that we face as a community dedicated to the twin pillars of competitive markets and resilient democracies. At CIPE, we instinctively understand that strong democracies provide the fertile ground for private sector growth. They protect property rights, fairly govern transactions, reinforce trust, and drive free thought and innovation. And in return, only the private sector can provide the prosperity that gives democracies the economic and stability and opportunity that drives optimism and support for democratic ideals. Indeed, the values of transparency and accountability and fairness that drive corporate performance reinforce the practices of democracy and governance. There's no guarantee that one of these systems will inevitably lead to the other. Rather, the relationship between competitive markets and democracy are mutually reinforcing and require conscious thought and action, active participation, and constant nurturing. For those of you joining us today, I'll let you in on a little secret. Joining us in the room are about 35 CIPE partners from around the world. And we've been using our time together to discuss the challenges the private sector is facing in markets throughout the globe and the importance of unity among democracies in preserving a free and competitive global market. In this endeavor, we've all become frontline partners in the struggle to ensure the private sector has effective rules of the game and that our governments work with transparency and clarity when making those rules. And the themes that we're discussing today are central to that struggle and core to our mission of securing democracy through economic reform, growth, and private sector development. As we'll discuss today, and as our chair laid out, CIPE's work is focusing its efforts in three strategic key directions that we feel are both evergreen in their nature, but also responding to the key challenges to market democracy being laid out by the rise of authoritarian economics, which use investment to drive political and security objectives in an environment that promotes corruption, distorts markets, and weakens democratic institutions in the countries they flow to. They also reinforce a system of mutual support between authoritarian states that, while hiding in the guise of national autonomy, actually create systems of dependence and leverage that are used without hesitancy to influence domestic decision-making. We call this phenomenon the phenomenon of corrosive capital. But as it matures beyond political expediency, I think for our purposes today, we should view as a maturing system of political economics that is in direct competition with our system of free competition, ethical practice, and rule of law. And we at CIPE frame our side of this argument as constructive capital. The three themes I mentioned just now reflect how we view the challenges facing those of us working to improve lives and strengthen a global market in which not only local businesses thrive, but in which our American companies can compete. We at CIPE strongly believe that when an economic system can provide for the growth of its smallest businesses, it can also provide a playing field for our American firms to compete. At the core of this work is our first objective at CIPE, that of advancing economic freedoms. This means protecting property rights, governing effective transitions through the rule of law, and protecting freedom of thought and action. Economic freedoms determine the ability of an individual or a large firm to enter a market, succeed, and grow. And as importantly, to exit a market if success proves elusive. Our second objective is also an evergreen theme of expanding opportunity. If fertile ground does exist, we must tend our garden to ensure that the tender shoots of entrepreneurship can take root and grow. The ability of all entrepreneurs to access markets, labor, and finance are critical, and the hand of governance must be responsive and effective, lest the weeds of poor regulation and corruption choke off growth. The promise of the digital economy, finance, and easy access to trade and global markets are key factors in driving fair grassroots competition that we strive for in this new era. Our third thematic approach, and our focus here today, represents the cutting edge of the struggle between corrosive and constructive capital systems, and we call it economic resilience. But before we can talk about it, I think we should take the time to have a definition of resilience as a term. And I know, kind of like empowerment, it's become one of those terms that's a bit hackneyed and overused. But for our purposes today, resilience and a resilient economy is one that's, first of all, diverse. This is a situation in which our aforementioned economy of opportunity provides a healthy mix of private sector actors, domestic and international, across a variety of sectors. A resilient economy is one that's open and competitive. It welcomes transparent investment from both domestic and international sources, and it treats all forms of investment and value creation as equals within a well-founded system of regulation and rule of law. And as economies trend towards greater influence of industrial policy, we also have to examine how to ensure that such policies do not distort markets or support cronyist economics. A resilient economy is capable of responding to external pressures. Perhaps our most topical factor of economic resilience, this focuses on how states respond to issues of economic security and national security threats. We need only look at the experience of the Lithuanian private sector, whose participation in Germany's supply chains came under threat from Chinese pressure following their country's embrace of Taiwan. China's also weaponized tourism. Countries like Palau have seen departures of Chinese visitors overnight when their policy decisions offended those leaders in Beijing. CIPE's work in this regard focuses on subjects such as investment screening, value chain development and monitoring, corrosive investment, and economic coercion. A resilient economy is capable of mobilizing in the face of internal shocks. As governments and companies can work together to build effective responses to external economic pressures, so too must they work to devise responses and policies towards domestic shocks. Natural disasters and conflict can challenge both public resources and private sector activity. Without planning and dialogue, decisions can be made that affect private sector growth, whether it's access to labor, material, or infrastructure. Good intentions can often have long-term implications. And I think about a discussion I had with a colleague from Ukraine some time ago who was from the agricultural sector there. And he talked about the difficulties of providing a harvest to feed and fund the national war effort when most of the farm vehicles had been requisitioned for the war effort and never returned. A clear case of justifiable need for the public good, but also a demonstration of the need for better strategic planning. So too must we think about the role of the private sector in generating post-conflict and post-disaster growth in economies of scarcity. CIPE's approach to responding to the challenges of economic resilience are rooted in the ability that only democracy provides to talk, plan, and adapt when a community of stakeholders is engaged at all stages in the development of policy and implementation. And the feedback loop that democracy provides between those that govern and those that are governed not only help companies develop more robust plans, but also undergird the stability of a society when economic resilience is challenged. Our discussions today are going to highlight both the challenges that countries face in building economic resilience, but also the unique approaches that CIPE's partners are taking to counter external threats to economic growth and build domestic resilience in the face of these unusual challenges. Too often in the city, we focus ourselves in a pattern of doomsaying and hand-wringing. And although I'm sure we'll have our fair share of that here today, our hope is that today's gathering will also provide you with the insights into things that can and are being done to provide and build resilient policies that support economic growth and strengthen overall societal resilience. And to go back to that overused word of resilience, I hope we prove that by empowering the private sector, another overword used, to be a partner in resiliency by both building a strong economy but also ensuring its overall stability, we can build better both strong economies and strong democracies. And by doing so, we'll build a better global economy in which American business and American values can compete and convince. I'm glad you're all here joining us today, and I really do look forward to a full day of invigorating discussion. And thank you very much, and let's move on with our first panel. Abdu?